Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as what if Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto Vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
The last two exams had ended badly for various reasons. In the first one, 2 years ago, he had begged Iruka 4 weeks to allow him to introduce himself earlier. Naruto was hoping to get the perfect combination between average and just below, with a couple of clearly advanced areas to graduate, without much attention being paid to it. That had not been the case. He had failed too much in the written exam, and his taijutsu was too lenient for the teachers, to allow him to pass only the accuracy with Kuna and Shuriken. However, the clone jutsu was what really convinced him. I didn't expect them to insist on only 3 clones. When he practiced alone, since no one would be willing to help him anyway, he always made at least 10 clones. I knew they weren't exactly the Academy's standards, but they worked pretty well. His version also only had a hand signal, but that had not been allowed in the exam. And so, the boy failed his first graduation exam with flying colors. It didn't matter, he thought then. Now I knew what to expect next time. But, apparently, his karma was still the blackest. Iruka had not been on the team of teachers running the exam the following year. There was a Kunoichi and 2 shinobi, who made their contempt for the boy clear in the first seconds after entering the door. The stares he received made him shudder, despite having dealt with similar situations all his life. He sneaked to the back and tried to be as invisible as possible. It didn't work. He had been called first to do all the demonstrations, in front of the whole class. Naruto turned pale, and tried to make sure his hands weren't sweaty. He always had a harder time making the stamps when he was nervous or his hands were wet. In the end, it had been of no use. The boy felt all the eyes on him, something he couldn't stand. Even after trying to overcome his fear with his many jokes and being openly criticized for them, he still felt his chakra and nerves fluctuating uncontrollably from restlessness. He recalled thinking that he wanted to be sucked into the ground as he stood up and failed his ninjutsu exam. That exam day had been the worst day at school I could remember. Throughout the day, he was the target of all the professors' ill will. The kunai he was given were manipulated and the shuriken bent. His exam was different from the others, and he faced the taijutsu prodigy, Rogel, in his training. Understandably, he had failed miserably again. And now it was the 3rd year that he was taking these exams. This whole year had been horrible. Bullying and teasing were just the tip of the iceberg. Life outside of school had also gotten worse. Her small apartment had been her refuge for a long time, a relatively safe place away from stares and insults. On the days he had to go out to the village, where he was beaten with stones and rotten food, he always ran home to curl up on his futon and browse through his worn-out books and scrolls, pretending that the outside world did not exist. This was one of the few reasons why he was doing much better at school than he was showing. Gigi had taken time out of his busy schedule to teach the little blonde boy to read and write when he was about 5 years old. The extensive set of scrolls had mysteriously appeared on her kitchen counter, a few weeks before she was due to start the academy at the age of 7. To the basic ones such as history, mathematics, geography, and chakra paths were added more advanced scrolls about ninjutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, and even some about art of the ceiling. The lonely boy had devoured them all, and to his confusion, more kept appearing as time passed. After 5 years of collecting them, he had a box with more than 70 scrolls and books. He had read, studied, and trained as best he could when other children were together, playing or spending time with family. However, Naruto never gave it much importance. He had never been exposed to such things, and their absence went almost unnoticed. If you noticed the sudden increase in violence lately, he used to get yelled at and kicked out of stores frequently, but he had never been actively pursued. For the past year, he had been chased or attacked at least once a week. His speed and stamina had increased drastically out of necessity. After all, he only found a limited number of places to hide. His house was also now a target. Spray-painted words and threats were everywhere when she got home from class and her stuff disappeared. His precious books had been saved only because he kept them in flat boxes under the floor. Naruto had trouble sleeping, fearing that he would be caught. They've been caught off guard. In addition, he avoided markets and shops even more than usual. These two things, lack of sleep and food, contributed greatly to his current state of restlessness. He was looking at the clock, ignoring Iruka-sensei's voice and the murmurs of the other children. Minutes before he was released, a sharp pain suddenly radiated from his forehead. Today's Parpa heard the chalk falling on his desk. Disguised laughter and taunts of the latest and typical idiot filled the room. Iruka was looking at him angrily, his hands on his hips. Naruto? This is important. Are you listening to me? Ah, there he was, the only person, apart from Gigi, who would really try to help him. Iruka's looks weren't harsh or dismissive like the others. The scarred teacher just wanted him to learn and try his best. Sorry, sensei, the boy thought with sincere regret. You will probably never see my best version. Naruto loved Iruka very much, and it was sad that the blonde guy kept things from him. But I had to do it. The boy smiled, closed his eyes, and rubbed the red spot on his forehead. Haha. Of course I was listening to you, Iruka-sensei. Of course I'm going to graduate this time, believe it. He said out loud. Iruka nodded warily. Well, tomorrow at 8 o'clock we start the exam. Please be punctual, or even earlier. He looked at the clock. You can leave now, I'll see you tomorrow. The avalanche of small people coming out the door was noisy, blocking the almost silent escape of a boy dressed in orange. From the nearest window, Naruto jumped from roof to roof, safely over the heads of the temperamental villagers. Thank God. I can go home and study now. Maybe I can even afford to go to Ichiraku's house tomorrow. He entered her apartment through the small window and quickly set up a trap. His door was already filled with 4 different traps in case anyone tried to break in. They didn't always keep people out, but they helped. The boy was eternally grateful to whoever was giving him all his books. The book on traps and snares was a very recent acquisition. He dropped down on his futon and carefully lifted the boards close to his feet. He took out his box of taijutsu scrolls and started to reread them on the second level for tomorrow. He fell asleep like that after hours of reading. The light was filtering from the rising sun when the boy woke up startled. His damaged watch marked 6:20. He sighed with relief. Plenty of time to take a shower and put everything in order. The water was cold, so her shower was brief. Naruto picked up one of these non-orange outfits to wear today. I only had 3, and I used them very rarely. Today, she chose a muted blue t-shirt, a mesh long-sleeved undershirt, brown pants and sandals. Black. He was carrying his gray gun bag and a sleeveless brown hoodie with a subtle orange and black spiral on the back. He took his time to cook some vegetables and some eggs from his meager supply, and then went back to carefully tying the handles of his kunai and sharpening each of his shuriken and senbon. Then he moved on to his meditation. This had suggested the Okage to him after last year's exam. Naruto did not meditate every day, because it was difficult for him to calm his mind and take risks to be relaxed. But he helped him when he got it. If he ever needed to calm down, it was today. So the boy sat down on his futon and closed his eyes. He sat with his legs crossed and his hands on his knees. He inhaled and counted, 1, 2, 3. Then he exhaled. He inhaled. By the time the alarm went off at 7:45, Naruto was almost asleep. He stretched out slowly and came out reluctantly. The morning was quite calm, even near the academy. He went down to the street, behind a building adjacent to the academy, and slowly made his way to the entrance. He went unnoticed because he entered with some companions. He shuffled into the living room and sat down in the middle of the last row. The perfect place to observe others without being seen. He looked around and saw a small table next to Iruka's desk. He had 3 chairs, a jug of water, and 3 glasses. Before he could get too curious, Iruka walked in with 3 older men that Naruto had never seen at the academy. They chatted quietly until all the genin wannabes were seated. Iruka turned and clapped twice to silence the class. Well, as I mentioned yesterday, this year's exam will be a little different. Naruto's stomach cringed when he heard that. No. What if my plan doesn't work in this situation? I planned it too, but with a stranger involved. Iruka kept talking, and the blonde forced himself to listen carefully. These three shinobi will be watching all the parts of him. They will be the ones to organize the teams after graduation. They will analyze their skills and weaknesses so that they can be included in a well-functioning team. I'll introduce you now. All three were intimidating. The first was a tall man wearing a black trench coat and a scarf. His face was marked diagonally. This is Ibiki Morino, he's a special honen. The second man was a little shorter, with dark hair pulled back in a bushy ponytail, a honen vest, and a tan leather vest over a mesh shirt. Iruka made a gesture to him. This is Shikaku Nara, the honen commander. The third man was by far the least scary, at least for Naruto. He was blonde, with blue-green eyes and wore a red ori over the standard honen vest and a simple black suit. Hinoichi Yamanaka is a member of the intelligence division. Iruka smiled and made a slight bow to the three of them. As they approached the table, Naruto was almost shaking. I had heard about Hinoichi and Shikaku before. Both were parents of classmates. Hino was bright and confident, and she looked remarkably like her father. Naruto had often heard him tell another girl named Sakura. He curious thing about psychology and observation that he had learned from his father. Shikamaru Nara was almost a carbon copy of Shikaku, even in his facial expressions and gestures. Naruto knew that the Nara clan was hailed as a clan of geniuses, which meant that Shikaku was probably even smarter. People, what a girl. God must hate me for this to happen. How can I even hope to make it with them looking at me? The boy could feel his hands shaking at the thought of being scrutinized by any of the powerful and intimidating honen. Iruka cleared his throat at the few murmurs there were. In burst. Example, I'm going to hand out the papers for the exam, don't turn them in yet. There were a few seconds of silence. Naruto stared at his desk, not wanting to be forced to see the doom that had befallen him. He knew this would be one of his last opportunities to graduate. If he stayed longer, he could be expelled from the academy. I have to do it. Somehow, I have to make it work. Maybe I can stick with the plan. Anyway, they'll probably be more worried about the clan guys. Especially for Inada, Sasuke, and Kiba. They could overlook a nobody like me. That one, yes, it may be true, a piece of paper slipped on his desk. The blonde guy looked up and saw Iruka smiling at him. Good luck, he whispered. Naruto forced a smile. Once all the exams were handed out, Iruka gave and Naruto quickly studied the 15-question exam. He could have easily answered them all, but in order for his plan to work, he needed a fairly consistent low level. Looking at it more closely, he saw a mixture of 5 different types of questions in easy groups, moderate and difficult. He chose 2 difficult ones to answer, and the rest of the difficult ones he would get wrong. Then he answered 4 of the moderates correctly, failing the last one. He answered all the easy ones. That should give me a score of 60 or 70. It's not bad, but it's not good. He lay back satisfied, looking up to see how much time he had spent. He made a face. Only 10 minutes. He bent over his paper and pretended to keep working. I can't be too quick, that would give him away. He shrugged his shoulders and tried to ignore the feeling of the stares on him for the remaining 20 minutes. Hinoichi and Shikaku met with Ibiki the night before the academy's graduation exam to go over their plans. The 3 honen were very pleased that the Hokage allowed the allocation of genin teams this year to be analyzed in more detail and attention. The 2 eldest had a particular interest, as their heirs were taking the exam. And Vicky had to be the impartial one to balance the others. So, what do you think we should be looking for? Yamanaka asked. Shikaku took a sip of his tea before answering. I was hoping to see the clan kids proficient in their various family skills, but the civilians might be more unbalanced skill-wise. What I would look for would be complementary strengths and weaknesses. But above all, compatibility of personalities. The blonde nodded slowly. He knew that much of his former team Genin's success was due to the close bonds the three of them shared. And no Shikacho was famous to this day for his impeccable teamwork. And Vicky spoke next. We should evaluate their personal weaknesses and strengths, as well as their interaction with the rest of the class. They sat together for another half an hour to decide who was looking for what before going on their way. They met again the next morning and walked together to the academy. They started their observation as soon as they walked through the door. Shikamaru and Choji were sitting together by a window, and No and a pink-haired girl were on either side of the dark-haired boy Uchiha. Kiba Inuzuka was sitting in the center of the room with some civilian children. The timid heiress Yuga was close to Kiba, but she was not part of the group. Shino Aburame was in the last row, visibly alone. The only other occupant in the last row was a blond boy dressed in brown. Hinoichi started labeling the most expressive students. Hino, Sakura, Kiba, and Shikamaru were probably the most expressive. Sasuke and Shino were almost silent, but probably very capable. Choji and Jinata were kind, but unpopular. The civilians were mostly quite moderate. They were in a situation and part of the world that they had not been raised for, and they would have difficulties with certain parts of the ninja world. However, the blonde guy in the background caught Yamanaka's attention. His posture and dress suggested that he felt more comfortable than civilians with shinobi culture. But his tense posture and distance from others did not fit. She looked at Ibiki and saw him watching the group of preteens. Shikaku gave him a heart and shot a glance at the blonde. Iruka introduced them, and they took their places at the table. Hinoichi leaned towards his old friend. Did you notice the blonde guy? What do you think? Ibiki intervened from the other side to answer Hinoichi. He and the Yuga girl caught my attention, along with the boy Aburame. Shikaku frowned slightly. Is the blonde one Naruto Uzumaki? I think I should be in this class. It's not what I expected from the boy. In the village it is noisy and causes problems. And Vicky watched the children turn over their leaves and rush to write. The three he pointed out were watched with particular attention. The Yuga girl blushed, and at first moved awkwardly with the pencil, but then quickly concentrated on the work, making only a short pause between questions. The boy Aburame did not show any emotion while working, he did not even stop. The blonde Uzumaki reminded himself he was very interesting. The boy examined the page with his eyes, then looked at it again with more attention. The interrogator noticed the observant glances that his two companions directed at him. He bit his lip, and he closed his eyes, nervous out of habit, thinking, and quickly began to answer the questions in the strangest way. He seemed to skip the top of the sheet in favor of a stitch almost halfway through, only to jump to the bottom and then back to the top. He did so with a worried and frustrated expression on his face. That's how the whole job was finished, and in a very short time. Shikamaru was the only child who finished. And Vicky saw a flash of surprise and sudden fear on the boy's face, and she bent down to run the pencil through the finished work. The Honin realized that he was not exerting enough pressure to score. Interesting. I want to see how was your grade. Went back to observe the rest of the class, a bunch of fools, and made more discoveries. The pink-haired civilian thought she was smart and very capable, but she obviously lacked the guts that a ninja requires. Sasuke Uchiha was very similar in a way. The dark-eyed boy was arrogant and relied on his surname and the massacre for much of his position. The Inuzuka boy was wild and rebellious, but he was also completely focused on the assigned task. A good skill once cultivated a little. And Yamanaka wasn't watching him as much as he was watching her. The brave blonde would turn her head to see the table out of the corner of her eye while taking the exam. She is confident in herself, but she also seems aware of herself and her abilities. He wondered what his fellow observers would say in the few minutes they had between parts of the exam. Naruto pretended to scribble until the bell rang announcing the end of his time. He could barely contain a sigh of relief. I had almost screwed up. He had no idea if he had really felt stares on him the whole time, or if it was just his noia. Iruka picked up the exams and sat down at his desk to grade them. There were nervous murmurs in the silence that followed. Naruto leaned his head on the desk. God, help me to finish today without much problems. A loud squawk from a chair made him look up, and to see his teacher standing up. Well, Aruno, 100%. Uchiha, 100%. Nara, 100%. Yuga, 99%. Aburame, 98%. Yamanaka, 96%. Inuzuka, 85%. Akimichi, 85%. Uzumaki, 76%. Everyone got 2-3 marks in the exams. Now, he went through all the exams announcing the grades. Only 2 students had failed this time. Iruka was happy. Even Kiba and Naruto had done well enough to try it. As long as they did well in the other exams. Naruto was happy with his rating, just above the halfway mark, 4 points in this section. I would try to get a similar balance in the other parts of the exam. Iruka smiled at his class. We will have a 10-minute break, and then we will leave for the Kyuna and Taijutsu tests. The conversation was instantly stoked. The 3 Honin got up and walked over to the desk. Naruto got a little worried when he saw them performing the tests. If they had observed it carefully enough, its pattern might be evident. He slumped in the chair and hoped no one would notice. Shikaku picked up the exam that interested him the most and glanced at it quickly. A neat, albeit childish, handwriting indicated that its author was Naruto Uzumaki. He concentrated on the same points that the boy had jumped on first and noticed that they were all questions. Advanced. The second pattern was the moderate ones and the last one, the easy ones. He also noticed that there was a pattern of correct and incorrect answers. And Vicky and Noichi examined the exam with him. And Vicky was the first to comment. The guy did it on purpose, he manipulated his exam. Hinoichi nodded absently, trying to decipher the boy's actions. Shikaku snorted. He planned very carefully, distributing his mistakes among the 3 difficulties, and got just enough right to add up his 2 points. What will he be doing? I wonder. Hinoichi frowned. Did you see him freak out when he realized it was over so early? He looked scared. Why is that? And his stance and his actions contradict each other. The interrogator nodded. He dresses like a child, but his discomfort is different from that of civilians. He was tense, as if expecting an attack. Shikaku played the incriminating role. Maybe he manipulated the test to go unnoticed. He sat in the back and was wearing very simple clothes. In fact, his position is perfect for observing others without being noticed. And Vicky smiled sarcastically at the thought of Shikaku. The smart kid. But one of us will have to stop him. The others looked at him, waiting for an explanation. We cannot judge the accuracy of his ability if he hides it. And Noichi sighed, running a hand through his long hair. You're right. But I don't think it's a good idea to confront him directly. The boy seems to be defensive, and if someone accuses him, he will probably react badly. And Vicky snorted. The children were, at best, troublesome. So delicate and naive. Shikaku leaned back on the desk. What would happen if we announced that anyone who is discovered tampering with any part of the test will automatically fail? The boy would probably hold back even more, the younger Honey pointed out. I think it would be better to catch him before they start bullying him, so he can really try. And Noichi shrugged his shoulders. It's complicated, but it might be the best option. We have to hurry up. There are only 5 minutes left. And Vicky looked around and saw that the boy was still sitting in the last row. I'll take care of it. You 2 can go out and see the rest. Shikaku and the Yamanaka crept out the door and left the interrogator with his task. Naruto was resting in his seat, hoping to calm down before he had to go out and perform again. A few steps in the suddenly silent room startled him. He looked up and saw the tall, dark man approaching him. The rest of the room was empty. Naruto felt his blood run cold. What did I do? What if he's like the others, after me? No, 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 this can't be happening. And Vicky saw that the boy was tensing up and breathing harder. He leaned over the sitting boy and stared at him. Well, boy, wouldn't you like to know that your test came out great tomorrow? Naruto turned even paler when he saw the sharp and predatory smile he directed at him. Most shinobi wouldn't lie or cheat on their fellow ninja, would they? Do you want to know what will happen to you if you do something like that again? The blonde was feeling sweaty and panicked. They knew it, and obviously the three Honin were not happy with his deception. He barely managed to shake his head in response to Iviki's question. The Honin came closer, invading the boy's personal space. I will not tolerate it. If I find out that you've been tampering with these tests again, well, the village will only lose one Genin student. By then, Naruto was panting, almost fainting. And Vicky judged him frightened enough to obey. Besides, his time was almost up. You'll be honest and precise from now on, do you understand? I understand you, Naruto squeaked, leaning on his chair to walk away. The young man walked away without saying anything else, leaving the young man shaking and feeling bad. Outside, rows of targets had been set up at various distances of a rope. The students were swirling around, chatting in small groups. Naruto came out just before Iruka called them to line up. The blonde was painfully aware of the three Honin watching from the barrier. What am I supposed to do? Morino-san said, I can't. Then everyone will come after me. Like the first days of school. The boy was still shaking, now wishing he hadn't come today. To repeat the academy would be a pleasure compared to what I felt now. His promise to the Okage was the only thing that kept him there. I told him that I would pass and become a ninja that he could be proud of. Thinking about the old man who had taken care of him, who had been kind to him, instilled in him a much-needed determination. He joined his companions in line, and did his best to ignore the shaking of his hands and the feeling of staring at him. By Gigi, I will try. He spat with difficulty and waited for his turn. Naruto was the second to last, only Shikamaru was behind him. He watched the others and forced himself to take a firm breath. He occupied his mind by carefully watching each person's pitches. And Nata was the first to surprise him with her 8 out of 10 in Kyuna and Shuriken. He had expected Sasuke to get a near-perfect score and Sakura to only get half. Civilian children had varying degrees of success. And no, Choji and Kiba had good scores. He spit up after Kiba backed away. It was his turn. Naruto took a step forward and accepted the 10 cribs that Iruka handed over to him. Iruka's smile steadied him enough for the blonde to weigh and balance the throwing knives. I can do this, ignore everyone else, pretend that this is a practice in the forest, turn the cribs, and 2 hold 4 in his hand. He came closer to the line and moved his wrist before he could think much. For hits, he didn't look at the targets. He held the next 3 Kyune by the leaves and threw them again. The last 3 he threw a second after the other 3. Finally, he looked up and almost cringed at the sight of the 10 Kyuna, and that he had scored. Iruka and the rest of his companions were stunned. The loser, the idiot who always screws up, had scored a perfect 10. The Tan professor coughed. Ah, well, very well, Naruto. He handed her a wad of shurikens. Naruto closed his eyes and picked them up. He threw them in 2 groups of 5, with the same results as before. Iruka was really stunned. He couldn't help but watch his favorite student with bewildered pride. I knew Naruto was clowning around to a certain extent, but I would have never imagined that the loud blonde was so capable. After scoring the scores, and taking a look at the 3 Honin, to see satisfied and suspiciously not surprised faces, he asked the blonde if he had anything else to show in this part of the exam. He always asked, even if none of the students tried harder than necessary of their own free will. Is there anything else you want to prove? Naruto quickly looked at Ibiki and the others before slowly nodding. I suppose so. Iruka blinked, and then quickly pointed to the rope. Come on, Naruto. Naruto wiped his sweaty hands on his brown pants and pulled out a wad of senbon. He counted 10 and, with a flick of his wrist, threw them. He didn't have to check this time. The senbon were their best projectile weapons, and Vicky looked at Shikaku in surprise. And Noichi frowned and quietly commented, didn't he look a lot like a Honin in those 3? And which Genin learned to use senbon? Naruto quickly accepted his senbon and shuffled away. Shikamaru took his place, and lazily got a 9 out of 10. Iruka was still trying to understand Naruto's sudden display of skill as he added up the scores and announced the points. He called his students by name out of habit, too distracted to follow the usual exam protocol. Sakura 1, Sasuke 2, Shino 3, Ochoji 2, Hino 2 and Mata 3, Kiba 2, Naruto 3. There were murmurs of disappointment, and no one missed Sasuke's withering gaze. Naruto cringed and moved closer to Shikamaru, who just yawned and blinked warily. Now, we have organized couples for taijutsu fights. Everyone will have 2 chances, even if he loses the first match. It will be a 2-minute match, or elimination if they get pushed or pushed out of bounds. The first match is Kiva against Hino. Kiva loudly protested about having to fight with a girl, saying that she could not be expected to fight with such a weak creature as Hino. Iruka silenced him, and the match began. Neither of them made much progress, as Kiba was reluctant to attack the girl, and she was less offensive. Iruka ended the match after 2 minutes. I would have the Honen score all the matches. Then 2 civilians came, both boys, who ended up fighting outside the rink. Shino fought Shikamaru, who won by pushing the other guy out of the rink. And kills against Sakura, who closed most of the chakra points of the other girls and was able to wait until the time ran out. Ochoji fought Sakura and pulled her out of the rink right at the end of the match. Naruto was called to fight Sasuke. Why me? What did I do? He muttered as he adopted a fighting stance. The Honens were still watching him. There would be no way he could do anything, and honestly, he wasn't sure if Iruka would accept him if he did. The guy was stuck, forced to perform at his best. He wasn't sure how he would fare, as he had never practiced against real people. Yes, he was fast, but I knew that Uchiha was also very good at taijutsu. And what would happen if I won? It was a pain. No one, against the heir of a clan, had no chance of going unnoticed if he won. The village held the Uchiha clan, or what was left of it, in very high esteem, as did the teachers. I'm sure he'd be suspended for some made-up offense. He bit his lip and looked at his opponent. Sasuke kept staring at him while they were waiting. Iruka shouted, "It starts." And Sasuke instantly jumped up to hit Naruto on the shoulder. The blonde dodged the kick with ease and reached out to hit the other's calf. His hit made an impact, but it didn't even affect the rookie. Naruto turned and followed up his punch with a kick that forced Lucia to dodge. Naruto pressed on, keeping the other boy moving. Sasuke was getting angry now, being made a fool of by the class clown. He grunted and turned left to get behind the blonde boy. He extended one foot and kicked Naruto in the stomach. The younger guy was able to dodge the blow slightly, but he still gasped and staggered slightly. Sasuke smiled maliciously and tried to fight back. However, Naruto recovered in seconds. He frowned at the look, which he received from the other. Using the movements and the shape of his scrolls, Naruto slightly lowered his body, curving his arms close to him. He attacked in a series of ultra-fast punches and kicks. Most hit their marks, shoulders, elbows, and knees. Naruto could see that his plan was almost finished. Sasuke was moving more stiffly, and with a distinct lack of the grace he had shown at the beginning. Going to the joints caused them to lock up slightly every time a hit connected. It should only take a little longer, the blonde accelerated, feeling that the end of the match was approaching. His fists and feet connected with Sasuke's elbows and right knee, and, suddenly, the dark-haired boy collapsed on his side. Iruka ended the match as Naruto walked away. The teacher was stunned again. He had almost become so absorbed in the flowing, dancing battle that he forgot to finish it. Naruto, who looked like he was about to shoot out when he entered the rink, had systematically blocked most of the other guys' joints. Iruka hadn't seen an academy student this advanced since Rogel. Naruto was nowhere near as specialized as the other guy. But he was clearly way above the fundamentals of academia, or even top-notch genin styles. There was a suffocating and absolute silence as the unpredictable #1 ninja quietly walked away. Iruka and Mizuki, his assistant for the exam, helped Sasuke up. The boy Uchiha fulminated with the look at his opponent with the look. His knee and both arms refused to move, and he felt bruises forming around the blonde's punches. Iruka let Mizuki help him to a bench, where he sat down next to Sakura, who, despite having her chakra points, was excitedly jumping him in his seat. Sasuke stared at her, but she laughed and got so close that their shoulders touched. Sasuke growled at him to no effect. While Mizuki tended to the two off-duty students, Iruka formed pairs for the rest of their second matches. All the aspiring genin were watching Naruto with a mixture of amazement, surprise, and curiosity. Naruto was pale again and hiding his trembling hands in his pockets. I knew this would be the end of him. He had beaten and humiliated the prodigy Uchiha, the Rookie of the Year. The girls loved him for being cruel to their Sasuke-kun and the villagers, God forbid they find out. It wouldn't surprise him if his apartment went up in flames. No, he was just dead. I was hoping to at least be able to talk to Gigi about this before something happened. Naruto was startled and looked at Iruka with his big ones. Blue eyes. His Iruka-sensei tensed up and held his breath as he saw the abject fear and panic on his student's face. Then Iruka smiled, hiding the sudden concern he couldn't help but feel for the boy. It's your turn again, he offered gently. The boy blinked, spitting with difficulty before turning and seeing Choji standing on the rink, waiting. Choj, at least he won't hate me if I beat him. He's quite kind, I hope. He came closer, breathing slowly and trying not to think about everything that was undoubtedly going to go wrong for him in the very near future. He forced himself to concentrate, blocking out the fearful whispers and the feeling of eyes watching him. Ochoji gave him a nod when he placed himself in front of him. The burly boy's cordial demeanor slightly eased Naruto's anxiety. That was enough for him to carefully defeat the other guy without having to embarrass him. Naruto only needed half of the allotted time to force Choji out of the rink. Iruka called the match over and called the class over for a half-hour break in which the points from this section would be counted. Most of the children were grouped in small groups. The looks and whispers above all made Naruto even more uncomfortable. His nerves were almost on edge already. He felt shaky and dizzy. He was overcome with gratitude when Iruka touched his shoulder and turned him to look at him. Hey, do you want to come in for a while? He offered. Naruto nodded. The hand on his shoulder gently pushed him towards the door. It was a warm welcome. The story of Sasuke. Sasuke Uchiha, one of the last Uchiha of the village hidden among the leaves, and of the whole world, was furious. He, the Rookie of the Year, had been humiliated by the asshole Uzumaki twice. At the academy graduation exam yesterday. I still couldn't believe how they had beaten him in his training. He, not that asshole, was the one who trained extra every day, the one who practiced every jutsu and tasting on a daily basis. He had a brother who instructed him when Itachi had time anyway. It didn't make sense that this heavy had surpassed him in anything. Sasuke was genuinely furious. The peasant had never performed well anywhere in the academy before, why now? Sasuke wondered if the blonde fool had cheated. Although, with all those honeys watching the exam, it was unlikely. And now he had stayed up most of the night, seething with anger. Sasuke snorted and kicked the sheets with a sulky air. The sun was beginning to rise. Itachi was at home, for once, so Sasuke would have breakfast with him soon. Then I would go back to the academy, for the last time. Thank God. The boy Uchiha got up and continued with his routine. Take a shower first, then get dressed in some of their clothes, all hand-embroidered with the Uchiha fan, and then pick up their weapons. Finally feeling a little more balanced, thanks to the family actions, and the visions of Naruto trapped with Sakura and Choji as teammates. Sasuke left his room. The corridors were silent as always, since then, no, always silent. He easily ignored the portraits on the wall after long days of practice. The kitchen door was open, and Sasuke could see his brother moving. Sasuke, good morning. Of course, Hitachi would notice it right away. He was the head of the Uchiha family and a Honin. Itachi was, without a doubt, one of the best ninja in Konoha. Sasuke simply hummed in response, sitting at the low table. Itachi, dressed in a casual yukata, joined him moments later. Sasuke ignored the twinge of pain as he noticed how huge the table looked with just the two of them. He started to eat after a muttered itadakimasu. Steamed fish, miso soup, white rice, and rolled tortillas were before him. I see you received your idiate. Itachi spoke after a few minutes. Sasuke shrugged his shoulders. I'm the Rookie of the Year. I couldn't have failed. The teachers of the academy could not stand to fail the last Uchiha. He sipped disdainfully. They did approve that peasant Uzumaki. Itachi frowned, thinking about the letter he had received last night. Sasuke continued to eat without noticing his brother's change of attitude. I'll be here all day, so when you're done with team chores and stuff, come back. I'll show you something new. Sasuke brightened up. Okay, I'll be back as soon as I can, Nirasan. Itachi smiled back at him. Sasuke got up, picked up the dishes, and left the kitchen. Itachi heard the door close a few minutes later. Former Captain Ambu took the letter out of an inner pocket. Letter with recommendations for the treatment of problems. The man sighed. I knew Sasuke would be very upset, but I had to agree with the statements and recommendations in the letter. I was just hoping it wouldn't be too much at once. Sasuke could pretend to be strong and unshakable, but he was much more vulnerable than he thought. Sasuke ignored all the fools in the classroom after glaring at Naruto and took his usual seat. He thought about who had graduated. Who would be on your team? Of course, they would place him with the other students who performed at least a little better than the rest of the crowd. Kiva was loud, but capable. One of the civilian boys, Kenji Jin, was the next least likely candidate to stop Sasuke. I would be a genin, a real ninja after today. He could finally get Itachi to teach him some of the more serious jutsus and katas that he had been wanting for years. Sasuke smiled slightly. He would become more powerful now, until no one could defeat him. He almost ignored the first teams on the list. Iruka's voice was already easy to ignore. He jumped up at the sound of her name, only to be instantly enraged. I chose El Gordo and someone named Aku. What the hell? There had to be a mistake. He was the last Uchiha, heir to the clan, and a very skilled novice. No way would they pair him up with a useless one like Choji. And I knew that Yui Kurena, and she was a woman. Her brother had mentioned her once. No way. Sasuke Uchiha wouldn't join a team without a future with a weak and obese partner, and a stupid sensei. I would discuss this with Itachi and the Hokage as soon as possible. He sat down, rigid with rage. People were coming out little by little, and then a woman with long, unruly black hair, dressed in red and white, came in. I knew it was Yui Kurena, and at first she made no move to get up. She surveyed the room, and Sasuke felt his breath catch at the sight of her eyes. They were almost blood red, with a darker circle. He quickly dismissed the similarity with the Sharingan, and reluctantly got up. Choji was already standing next to her. The woman smiled slightly at him when he stopped in front of her. Okay, let's go then. He turned and led them. He didn't seem to notice Sasuke's cold gaze or Choji's nervousness. Sasuke was trying to be patient. I would fix it soon. One complaint from him, and he would have a new team by this time tomorrow. He followed the woman to training camp 6. Kurena and sat down on the grass and motioned to the two boys. All right, he smiled at them. I'd like us all to introduce ourselves. Ochoji moved before asking. Yui-sensei, don't we have a third partner? Aku, right. Kurena already felt. Yes, Yuki Aku. He turned to the trees and made a come here gesture. A figure slowly emerged from among the trees. Sasuke frowned at her. She was wearing a teal ori with white trim, over a brown long-sleeved shirt, and a matching brown bed. Her dark brown hair was tied up in a bun covered with white fabric. 2 strands of hair framed her face, fastened at the ends with small silver strands. She had her nails painted green. In short, Sasuke found her very beautiful, much more so than Hino and Sakura. The girl also seemed shy. This made Sasuke frown. A shy and pretty girl would be practically useless in combat. What the hell was the Hokage doing? Forming a team with 2 delicate women was simply. Aku sat a little further away from Choji and Sasuke. Choji smiled at them, and then turned his attention back to his sensei. Now that we're all here, I'll start with the introductions. I'm Yui Kurena. You can call me Kurena, and I'm a honey. I graduated from the academy at the age of 9, and was promoted to Chunin at the age of 13. I like to read books, practice genjutsu, and study the language of flowers. My dream would be to be a successful honey, and eventually get married and start a family. He turned to look at Choji. The boy blushed slightly, and started eating a bag of chips. Well, Munch, I'm Akimichi Choji. I am 12 years old, the heir of my clan. I like to eat, and spend time with Shikamaru Crunch Munch. I hope to be a reliable companion and to become a Honin one day. And he kept eating, looking at Sasuke. Sasuke frowned again, but he still wasn't sure. I was not at all impressed. A chubby guy with almost no ambition and a weak woman. I would have to show them that I was different, superior to them. I'm Yuki Sasuke. I am the only heir of my clan. I have very few followers. I will become the strongest, and I will take revenge on those who destroyed my clan, annihilating them. He kept a reserved posture and ignored the glances of Choji and Kulina. Then he came to Aku. His voice was soft. I'm Yuki Aku. I am the last survivor of my clan and my family. I come from the land of water. I traveled for several years as a missing ninja with Momichi Zabuza. I enjoy studying medicine and anatomy. I want to become a man who can measure up. From slobs to not being as strong. Choji and Sasuke looked at him strangely. You a man who? Huh. Choji sputtered, preventing Sasuke from doing so. Kureina and chuckled. Aku is a boy. He arrived in Konoha a few months ago with his teacher, a well-known missing ninja. He is actually closer to a Chunin than a Genin, but the Hokage thought he could use a transition to life as a Konoha shinobi on a Genin team. Sasuke was done, well done for today. First, he has a woman as a teacher, then a stupid one as a partner. This weird androgynous idiot was the straw that broke the camel's back. Iluchia got up and turned to look with a sinister look at the three who were still sitting. This team is a joke. I refuse to be detained like this. He left in a rage, without listening to Kureina, and when she called him. He returned home, sliding out the window, instead of the front door. I wasn't going to see Itachi yet, he had to clear his head first. He walked to and fro, muttering curses and insults under his breath. That's how Itachi found him 10 minutes later. The Honin had heard his brother returning, 2 hours in advance. He suspected that the reason lay in his equipment assignment. Itachi gently knocked on the door before entering Sasuke's room. Ototo, is something wrong? Sasuke turned around, his anger overcoming his minimal patience. Yes. Do you know who they put me with? He continued without waiting for an answer. 1 weak woman, 4 sensei, and 2 losers. They will do nothing but turn me away from my ambitions. I will not tolerate it. You'll have to come with me so that the Hokage corrects this stupid mistake. This is totally unworthy of the last member of the Uchiha clan. His speech provoked a frown and a sigh of disappointment in his brother. Itachi was hoping, although he didn't expect it, that Sasuke would react better. He hadn't even told her the worst about his team. Itachi sat down on the bed and motioned for Sasuke to sit next to him. I need you to listen to me, Sasuke. He usually meant what he said, but something about the way he said it left him paralyzed. He sat down slowly and faced his brother. I know you're not going to like hearing this, but I need you to listen to me. He repeated. Since the attack, Sasuke shuddered. You've been acting, well, really bad. Sasuke took a deep breath to complain. No, I know you deserved some freedom at first, but you've changed for the worse, Sasuke. You ignore everyone and everything that you consider inferior to you, and you consider yourself superior to everyone else. Do you think that, as a Uchiha, you deserve more respect and power than others? That's false. Sasuke frowned. Itachi reached out his hand to touch her forehead gently. I know you have some talent, but you should look at yourself objectively. You are not the best, and you will have to work hard to gain strength. You can't rely on our Kik and Genkai, or our last name, to get power. Itachi sighed deeply. I received a location letter with details of your graduation. It is strongly recommended that you see a therapist. What? No. I don't need to, Sasuke exclaimed, furious. Itachi glared at him, surprising the boy. Her brother was one of the kindest and calmest people I knew. I know your feelings, I was the one who asked you to see one before. This is not up for discussion this time. Your position as a genin is conditional. Sasuke leaned back, surprised. What? Conditional? I couldn't believe it. He was a Uchiha, this wasn't supposed to happen to him. You have to be able to treat your teammates and your sensei with respect, work with them, and form a strong team. Itachi informed her gently. She didn't want to hurt her little brother, but she couldn't let his behavior stay like this. You will have a monthly evaluation of Hinoichi Yamanaka with Kirinarison. If you fail to adjust your behavior and integrate into the team, you will be expelled from the ninja ranks. Sasuke stared at Hitachi, speechless. Itachi got up and poked his brother again. I'll be downstairs in the studio. Think about it. Be honest and examine yourself. This is serious, Sasuke. You won't get another chance if you make a mistake this time. You're destroying yourself like this. Please, for me, don't do it. He's gone. In Iruka's small office, Naruto was sitting in the chair with a cup of tea and a small plate of cookies. Iruka was sitting next to him, at an angle facing them. The boy was very still and silent, two things that Iruka had never thought to describe. If he hadn't seen the expression on his face after his first match, the scarred Chunin would have thought that it was a figment of his imagination. Naruto waited for her to look up from the teacup. Are you okay? Naruto just took a good sip of tea. Maybe you. No, not really, he said in a choked voice. Even more worried, Iruka bent down to touch his forehead. His skin was cold and clammy. Are you sick? Should I take you to the hospital? Naruto simply shook his head and stared at his feet. What happens then? You can tell me, you know. You have my word as an ex-joker, I won't say it. He tried to smile at his student with this last remark. That's how he got Naruto to listen to him in his second year at the academy. Their shared passion for jokes had caught the boy's attention. The man was rewarded with a small smile that was drawn on the boy's lip. Do you promise? You can't be mad, he sounds so young. I promise I won't get mad at you, no matter what, he replied solemnly. The boy nodded and put the tea and the plate on the coffee table. He shrank his knees and sank his head into them. I'm scared, he whispered. Iruka felt his heart melt, and at the same time, pain and guilt. He should have tried harder to get closer to the young man. I knew what it was like to be an orphan. The Chunin pulled Naruto to himself and put an arm around him. Afraid of that. A lot of things. He replied in a muffled voice. I don't want to fail this time, but I can't. I just can't stand being stared at. I feel short of breath and I'm shaking. And if Morino-san thinks I faked again, even if I haven't, he'll be really mad, and besides he's a Hunin. So he might catch me and Greek. Iruka silenced him and leaned over to rest his head on his spiky blonde hair. She rubbed her back with her hand to calm him down. Shh, it's okay. I'm sure a lot of other students don't like being in front. We all get nervous sometimes. And what about Ibiki? Naruto was still shaking and breathing hard. He couldn't contain his words now that he had started. He wished with all his might that the fears and dizziness would disappear. He and the other two reviewed my written exam and found out that I tampered with it. Iruka pulled away and looked at the boy with a frown. Did you cheat? That didn't sound right. Naruto could get in trouble for mischief, but he never cheated or caused trouble at school. Yeah, no. I did, but only to get a lower score. He ran out and, seeing Iruka's face, tried to explain. I didn't want to take out more than 75% pay because if he scored a little below the average, no one will notice on the exam. They won't scold me. Iruka was completely confused. So you were trying to get a low score, so you made a mistake on purpose. Big blue eyes stared at him. Yes. He took a breath, fearing his sensei's reaction. But why would you do it? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I always get in more trouble when I do things right, so I do them wrong. Even being polite. People get so mad at me when I try to be polite that I just have to be rude all the time. Then they just yell at me. It's the same at school. He added. I've never bothered when you're doing well. What made you think that? Iruka felt anger and a violent impulse upon hearing the boy's comment about the villagers. Well, he looked at his favorite again. Jirota-sensei yelled at me and told me to get out of his class on the first day of my freshman year. Iruka wanted to curse his understudy. I only answered one question, well, and she slapped me and made me stand in the hallway for the rest of the day. Iruka hissed. And what does this have to do with exams? Are you sure you want to graduate? She recalled with bitterness the shyness with which the boy had behaved around her after returning from his mission and starting to teach classes, and how Naruto had begged him to be allowed to take the exam earlier. I just assumed it was the same. I tried to just get by with the lowest overall score, you know, be good at some things and pretty bad at the rest, like Rogel. Then I could graduate, and no one would have reason to get angry or hurt me. He remembered that exam. How nervous and then disappointed the young man had been. Why did you fail again the following year? You did just as bad. The professor wasn't trying to be harsh, but he wanted to, he didn't need to know. To understand how much she had failed her precious son. Naruto sipped through his nose. You weren't there, and the teachers really hated me. He had to go first in all the practices, and the kune were broken, and he shrugged. It just didn't work out. Iruka could barely contain his anger against his companions. How dare they bully a child? And this year? He asked her in a low voice. The distressed child was finally leaning towards him. He had it all planned out, just how to do it, but Morino-san noticed and said that a good ninja wouldn't cheat like that. And it was scary, so I haven't been able to fail anything, except the written exam. Iruka let out a sigh. So, what you were doing outside was normal for you? Mom. I did my best. She leaned back to look into her teacher's soft brown eyes. Are you mad at me, sensei? He asked without waiting for an answer. Because I'm really sorry, but I didn't mean to cause trouble. Really, I just wanted to graduate and be left alone. I promise not to do it again, so you won't get angry. Shut up, nothing like that now. I'm not angry. Surprised, but not angry. I am very proud that you have learned so much. I wish you had told me that. I could have given you more appropriate lessons. He died slightly, trying to bring a touch of lightness to the conversation. I'm glad it's just this. I was afraid you were going to throw up for a moment. Naruto was finally able to smile. He had calmed down for the first time since his arrival that morning. His Iruka-sensei was not upset, he was comfortable, and had a delicious tea. He was feeling much better, almost wondering why he had been so upset just a few minutes ago. He refused to think about the dark eyes of the Honin who followed his every move. Instead, she ruffled her hair on end and smiled. You know me, I never get sick. I'm going to be an amazing ninja. Getting sick is too mundane for me. He kept a look pretending seriousness. Iruka smiled back at him and then laughed. I don't know many amazing ninjas who eat buckets full of ramen, Naruto gasped theatrically. Sensei, how can you say something like that? Ramen is worthy of a king. The couple broke out incarcerated. Iruka hadn't let go of his new discoveries, but he couldn't help but laugh with the boy. A knock interrupted them. Iruka noticed that Naruto was moving uncomfortably. The professor got up and opened the door to see Ibiki. Naruto shuddered, and his smile faded. Iruka looked inquisitively at the Honin. I wanted to talk to you, Humanozen. The master nodded slowly, wondering why the Honin needed him now. Naruto, why don't you get ready for the rest of the exam? I'll be right out. The boy crept out the door, avoiding the man at ease. Is there a problem, Ibiki-san? Iruka asked once the door was closed again. Not necessarily. The taller man came over and leaned on the back of the sofa. I just had some concerns about some of your students, specifically young Uzumaki. Iruka stirred, aware that this might end up being a problem. Naruto, what's wrong with him? Is there any good reason for the kid to use Chunin-level weapons, sensei? I was under the impression that the academy did not teach how to use needles. And Vicky wanted to see what the man would do in the face of an accusation. If one knew what made people angry, one would know a lot about them in general. I must say that Naruto is giving us a little surprise today. Iruka got up and started walking. I wish it were a better surprise, he murmured. It's funny, Ibiki thought. The young professor looked even more surprised than all of us. Did you really not know that the boy was capable? Iruka turned to look at him. No, I hadn't even considered that. I hate to say it, but I thought Naruto really struggled with the basics. He never did well at anything. I was wondering if it was just the learning environment. Some kids are like that. They do better in real life, in practical classes. I knew he was a little shy, and that he was trying to hide it by playing the class clown. But I think he was going much further than simple shyness. I was already rambling. The darling that he felt for all his students, and in particular for Naruto, manifested itself in concern. And Nada is just shy and insecure. I think when he gets a chance to stand out and achieve something, he'll be fine. But Naruto, I just don't know. I had no idea that he falsified exam grades and manipulated his work. If I didn't even realize how I was going to really meet him. The dark honey had heard enough. He didn't even have to question or pressure the young professor. Sensei, I understand that you have a certain weakness for all your students. However, it is not possible for him to know or understand them all closely. You did well to bring them here. There's not much more I can do. Iruka became discouraged, recognizing the truth in his words. You're right, of course. He looked at the clock. There were only a few minutes left. Besides Naruto, did you have any other questions? And Vicky shrugged her shoulders slightly. The Yuga heiress you already talked about. Shikamaru Nara and Sasuke Uchiha, what do you think about them? Shikamaru is a good boy. It is difficult to motivate, but if he decides to do something, he is very capable. It's a bit weird, but if he hadn't distanced himself from others because of Choji, he might have been popular. He doesn't care much about other people's opinions. Her smile dimmed at the thought of the other guy. Sasuke is hard to define. He's an excellent student, but I'm not sure he's really ready to be a full-fledged ninja. Why is that? Has difficulty with simple things like balancing skills or group projects. He says he doesn't need to practice the academy's taijutsu because he learned the Uchiha style and it's superior. He does not like to be matched for any homework or activity because the other student will slow him down. I've tried to talk to him about these things, but I don't think he'll listen to me. The Honen hummed thoughtfully. Has anyone seen what she went through? Iruka ran a hand over his face and snorted warily. Not that I know of, no. I worry that he is too isolated to trust anyone enough to talk to them. He does not play with others during recess and does not talk to me or his classmates. The teacher then excused himself to go check on the students and prepare for the final part of the exam. The Honen took his time to meet up with the other two observers. And Vicky thought the same as the teacher. Iruka had been right with his perception of the Nara and the Uchiha. He had observed the dark-haired boy after Naruto entered. Sasuke had been rude and dismissive to anyone who spoke to him. Only a few blushing girls had been brave enough or foolish enough to approach him after the medanin was over. It didn't sit well with Vicky. He knew too well the consequences of arrogance and pride not to be cautious. A bell rang to signal the start of the last exam, and Vicky was forced to put his thoughts aside for a moment. Naruto had loitered in the hallway outside the classroom after leaving Iruka's office. He felt better and worse after his conversation. Admitting to his beloved sensei that he had been lying to him ate away at the guilt. But the realization made him feel lighter and less afraid. Iruka was the teacher in charge of this exam, so he could understand Naruto. Iruka had told him that it was a normal thing to be nervous or scared sometimes. It helped him calm his nerves after the stressful morning. But there was no way for Naruto to enter the classroom and be watched by all the other students. He saw Iruka hurry up and open the door. Naruto slid in behind him and took his place in the back row with just a few glances. Sasuke glared at him, and some of the others looked at him curiously. However, they couldn't stop at him when Iruka drew their attention to the front of the hall. The scores of the encounters are as follows. Naruto sank into his seat, hoping that for once things would work out for him. He had passed the taijutsu exam with 3 points. I had 7 so far, and 8 was the minimum to graduate. He just had to wait for his turn for the ninjutsu exam. This would be the hardest part. He closed his eyes and let himself fall into the chair. In the background, he vaguely registered the names they were calling. Time seemed to slow down and speed up at the same time. Finally, too soon, Iruka called him. He followed his teacher to a small room on one side of the main classroom. There was a long curved table with a wide free space in front. The 3 Honen were seated at one end of the table. Iruka occupied an empty chair next to Inuichi. Very well, For this part of the exam, 3 jutsus must be successfully executed: the eng, the kawarimi, and the clone. The quality and ease of the jutsu will be taken into account for the score they receive. The teacher recited, smiling at his nervous student. Naruto was sweating again under the gaze of the 4 men. She bit her lip before closing her eyes. The eng was quite easy. He had been practicing his own version for years. He quickly reviewed the few hand signals and, after a cloud of chakra smoke, disguised himself as one of the chunin he guarded. They were studying the main doors. Every detail was present: the spiky black hair and the goatee, the bandage on the nose, the skin tone and the height. He had even managed to get his eng to the exact height of his target. The 4 men watching were intrigued for different reasons. It seemed strange to Iruka that, of all the students so far, Naruto was the first one not to transform into himself. It seemed strange to Shikaku that the boy knew enough about Agan's appearance to reproduce it as well. And Vicky and Noichi thought that the detail demonstrated the boy's ability to observe others. Iruka smiled even more. Katetsu Agane, excellent. Naruto changed again with a second cloud of grayish-purple smoke. Naruto quickly performed the substitution jutsu with a chair to the side. He changed again while Iruka was writing this down on his sheet. Well, now there's only the cloning jutsu left, he commented. This made Naruto fidget. He took a quick look at the 3 honin before looking at his sensei. Huh. It is. I mean, I can. He spit up. Iruka looked at him patiently. You can do that. Naruto fiddled with the bag on his leg. I have to do the academy's cloning jutsu. He muttered. Iruka felt the tension leaving him. As long as you can produce 3 clones that are not visibly clones, you can use any cloning technique. Naruto nodded sharply, feeling a surge of relief. Fine. He took a step back and crossed the index and middle fingers of each hand. And Vicky jumped up in her chair seconds too late to stop the boy. Shadow clone jutsu. He screamed. A surge of chakra was felt before a huge cloud of smoke filled the room. 20 copies of Naruto filled the room. They were all solid, identical to their creator. Iruka could only blink. I've never seen this jutsu, let alone so many clones. And Vicky was still standing, a look of amazement visible in her dark eyes. Shikaku seemed to want to laugh, and Noichi was frowning slightly. The blonde coughed slightly to break the silence. Well, this is unusual. Tell me, Naruto, where did you learn this jutsu? Hey, I saw an ambo do it once. I had a lot of problems with the academy jutsu, so I tried this one. It worked, so he wondered if he had screwed up. Something was wrong, no doubt about it. The interrogator was very stoic, and to have that look of amazement. Have you decided to try an ambu technique? Iruka shrieked, half indignant, half amazed. Yes, is it bad? The boy asked timidly. And Vicky slowly sat down again. That is one of the several jutsus contained in a forbidden scroll of the village, he replied slowly. He creates solid, corporeal clones, capable of acting semi-autonomously. It is forbidden due to the huge amount of chakra needed to produce even one of them. Many ninjas destroyed their chakra channels by trying. Iruka turned pale when he heard this. He sneaked around the table to Naruto. Are you okay? Do you feel dizzy or nauseous? Naruto looked at the 4 of them with wide eyes. I'm fine, he murmured absently. I will get in trouble for using this jutsu as it is forbidden. He seemed to shrink a little. Shikaku replied this time with his leisurely voice. No, it's okay. The only reason it is not allowed is because it may harm the one who uses it. But you clearly are fine. He shrugged his shoulders. Don't you know which anbu he wears it as? Naruto was surprised by the strange question. He was an anbu dog. Shikaku laughed a little. Yes, it sounds like the dog, of course. Iruka stroked Naruto's head for a moment more before taking a seat. Well, I guess this is it. You can now dispel the clones. Naruto nodded and searched for his chakra. What he didn't use for the clones came back quickly as they disappeared. Am I done yet? Ah, yes. Iruka absently got up and handed him one of the extra guides from the table. Naruto took it with a trembling hand. You did excellent in the last 3 exams. I think you would have been good at the first one too. The boy blushed. Iruka smiled at him and walked him to the door. Naruto hurried back to his seat and tried to disappear from sight. Iruka watched him for a moment before calling the next name on his list. 20 minutes passed and Naruto was sweaty and biting his nails. He had not been able to ignore the few glances and whispers directed at him. He tried to concentrate on analyzing his results today, but he couldn't. And Vicky worried him too. The dark man was terrifying. It almost seemed as if he could see through anything. Naruto wasn't sure where he was with him. Was he another one of those who hated him, or was he just strict? He seemed really surprised when Naruto used the shadow clone jutsu. Why is that? Was it really such a bad jutsu? She wanted to scream and pull her hair out. All these questions were spinning endlessly in his head. However, it had happened. That was the most important thing right now. It had happened, but which team would he end up on? How were you organizing them this year? I knew that test scores were used before. The tallest, the shortest, and the best academically used to go together. I knew I would have ended up with Sasuke, who hated him, and Sakura, a civilian girl obsessed with Sasuke. But now, I had no idea. There was no way to understand the numerous combinations without knowing how the three Honin plan things. With Sasuke and Sakura, I'm sure I wouldn't have even made it through the rank quests of how could you collaborate with someone who hated you, and someone else who was just going to admire their partner. That didn't help him feel better about the possibilities. I was still anxious and unsure of what was going to happen. I had received too much attention today. And Vicky and Shikaku were too focused on him. Iruka would be too now. The Okage might even ask to speak to him, my god. What if he was sent back to the academy as a liar? Well, the exams are over. Iruka, bless him, interrupted his panic-filled mental rampage. Those who passed must be here by 8 tomorrow to be assigned to the teams. You are dismissed. Naruto caught the professor's serious gaze. He knew from experience that Iruka wanted to talk to him. Naruto sighed, but stood still while the rest of the students ran out. He really didn't want to have to talk, but he understood why Iruka was waiting for him. She reluctantly joined him once the room was empty. Naruto, how about we get some ramen and have a chat? Iruka smiled at him. Naruto shyly smiled back at him. At least he doesn't look angry. Maybe it's good to talk. Iruka-sensei always understood the jokes after all. And Vicky pushed her chair back after the last brat in the academy finished. They were so pitiful and friendly exams when I was Genin. And Noichi was going over his notes for the day. Man, it's hard to tell if these kids are horrible or have potential, the blonde growled. It seems to be half and half. Most of them seem to have potential, but a big complex. Shikaku yawned. The Aburame boy and the Inuzuka are some of the only ones that seem to be already balanced. Those with the most potential also seem to have the most serious weaknesses. And Nada could be as much of a prodigy as her cousin if she wasn't so self-conscious. But the boy Uchiha is an example to follow. And Vicky nodded when Hinoichi said this. I think Sasuke Uchiha should be placed carefully. The interrogator got up and started pacing back and forth. He's too self-absorbed, and his arrogance would cripple any team by now. Shikaku sighed. This is going to be problematic. I know the council will push for him to be included in Kakashi's team. Sharing in training and all that. And Vicky frowned. That's the worst possible location. I would put it with Kirin there, but only after consulting him. Hinoichi wrote down his ideas for Sasuke and lay down. What did you all get out of Uzumaki? And Vicky smiled predatorily. He's already a ninja. I don't think any student at the academy has hidden their ability so completely in decades. He has the skills that point to a genius like Hitachi or the fourth. The man laughed slightly. If it hadn't been for the exams, we might not have found out what was wrong with him. And Noichi frowned. The blonde man had tried to reconstruct what he knew about the boy to create a kind of profile, but he was getting to different results. I still don't get it. He dresses to blend in and tries to fail the exam. He seemed to close in on everyone whenever they paid attention to him, but he is well known in the village for his antics and bad behavior. It almost feels like I'm trying to be two different people. Shikaku let a slow smile spread across his face from his relaxed position at the table. Wow, that makes a lot of sense now. And Noichi gave him a dismissive look at his vague statement. The head of the Nara clan chuckled at his friend. What would you do if people deeply disliked you after you have demonstrated an ability of yours? The blonde man frowned. Tell them to fuck off. Shikaku, what are you doing? What if you were an orphaned and lonely child who was looking for acceptance from such people? And Vicky frowned sadly. Hinoichi cursed, do you think he hid to be accepted? Shikaku just smiled, think about it. Naruto demonstrated an advanced and even specialized skill in every part of the exam. I know some of the younger Chunin and some veterans have serious issues with the guy. The Honin did not, and the Chunin who were present during the Third War did not. But the kid only interacted with civilians who had no idea and with some Chunin from the academy. Shikaku was really excited. Fear causes all kinds of reactions, and almost none of them are good. I guess the kid has hardly ever heard a kind word apart from Iruka. Naruto probably only had to demonstrate her skill once for someone to stop her. The three Honin frowned. Hinoichi thought about his little Hino. He would be furious if someone destroyed his trust like that. So, what do we do with the kid now? Ibiki asked him. He has all the skills to be a great kid if he gets help. Shikaku felt. I think they should pass it on. I'm sure he's got some problems. But the most difficult thing is to put him on a team. He and the Yuga girl seem to be the most delicate to place. His team could be decisive. And it couldn't be good for Inada. Inada seems to lack more confidence, not skill. Hino is very stable like Kunoichi and belongs to a clan. That will make it easier for them to understand each other. Hinoichi was pounding the table with a pen, thinking intensely. And Vicky nodded. Okay, so one guy to balance things out. Kiba and Nuzuka would be a good counterpoint to the two. Shikaku pondered, expressing his thoughts as they arose. The Inuzuka clan is very protective of those they consider part of their pack. Inada would be protected by him. In addition, he is loud and boisterous, which can make Inada come out of his shell. So Yuga, Yamanaka, and Inuzuka will form a team. They would be a good capture team with Kaka's and Ataka's sensei. And Vicky was pleased. I think Naruto Uzumaki will require a different kind of equipment. He seems to stand out as an undercover agent, or as an all-rounder. Its facade is quite impressive, and apparently, long-standing. Shikaku slumped in his chair. Naruto would be a little harder to place. None of them really knew what he was capable of or how far he had advanced. His personality was also in doubt. He was shy and insecure, or distrustful and bitter. It was hard to know. Shino Aburame might be a good choice. He's pretty average in all respects, but he's a solid kid. Yes. And he's calm enough not to overwhelm Naruto. Hinoichi tapped his pen again. I have a feeling Naruto will need support, and having to deal with a competitive or more energetic partner. Maybe more of a struggle than a help. The interrogator intervened. So Naruto, Uzumaki, and Bormi. There's one more to go. I don't think it's good to have civilians on this team. I know there's more going on around that kid in the civilian areas than the shinobi. Shikaku took a mental inventory of the remaining genin wannabes. That practically leaves Choji, Kimichi, and my son. Hinoichi nodded. And Vicky let the two men talk first. After all, they knew both boys firsthand, better than he did. Choji is a sweet boy, very loyal, but I don't think his skills are a good fit. Shino would bully him, and I don't think he and Naruto will benefit each other in a team. Shikaku nodded immediately. Yes. Outside of the team, they would be good friends if they spend enough time together. But they don't fit well. That leaves Shikamaru. The pair looked at Ibiki for confirmation before Inuichi wrote it down. Fine. Only the Uchiha and the Akimichi remain, and some civilians. There was a long, heavy pause. The three of them were thinking about the remaining students and the best way to place them. And Noichi coughed slightly as a preamble. Speaking of civilians, I don't think Aruno should pass. He watched the reaction of others. I knew it would be a little difficult. Konoha always needed more Kunoichi for the field. Many retired earlier to start families. And due to the nature of some of the missions they were sent on, many also retired to escape the rigors. Sakura Aruno was intelligent, no doubt, but she lacked the mettle and mentality necessary to be a ninja. She's a weaker candidate, Ibiki agreed. If it had been for him, the interrogator would have cut her off immediately. The fact that he was a civilian complicated things. Not many purely civilian children applied to the Ninja Academy. It was an unspoken rule that clan children, even those from much smaller clans, had an advantage over others. Many parents protested, claiming an unfair advantage over their own children. It would not look good for a girl, a civilian girl, to be flunked. But none of the three were willing to place an unfit ninja on any team. Too many deaths had resulted from such placements. And Vicky sighed. Damn politics, it can't even work without breaking some rule or offending some counselor. I agree. He just doesn't have the mentality or the physical ability. And Noichi looked relieved and a little sad as he scored the mark on his exams. Then let's go with the Uchiha, Shikaku said with a frown, something that contrasted with his usual bland and bored expression. He's got some problems. And Graves too. He is very arrogant and bellicose. I got the impression that he thinks he's superior to everyone because of his last name. And that, added to his hero complex wounded by the massacre, makes it almost impossible to work with him. And Noichi disguised a smile at the rant. He knew that teamwork was essential for his old friend. It always amused him to see the reaction of the lazy Nara to such situations. I agree. It is clear that the boy is still affected by what happened. I know Itachi has tried to get him to open up or look for friendships, but the boy hasn't, Ibiki confessed. Itachi is only 18 years old. He can't be expected to be able to raise Sasuke besides being a honey and being intermittently in Ambu. I would recommend putting conditions on Sasuke's graduation. As for example, the interrogator raised a marked eyebrow. I'd put him on probation. I would require him to attend therapy and a mental therapist, as well as obedience and courtesy towards his sensei. Very well, Ibiki nodded reluctantly. I think the rest of his life will be crucial. Akimichi might be a good choice. You say he's loyal and friendly. Those qualities could make Sasuke Uchiha want him, and they form a team. And Yui Kurenai would make an excellent sensei. He is very stable, and his focus on genjutsu would be ideal for an Uchiha. Besides, he could connect with Sasuke. I know you've studied enough child psychology to prepare for your first Genin team. And Noichi seemed very happy with the idea. The other two didn't see any flaws and agreed. The third place could go to the young man